what should someone eat at 3 p.m. when they're tired? Because everyone has that post-lunch, slump.
They do.
Afternoon slump.
They do, but it actually can go away. If you steady your glucose levels and if you no longer have these spikes, you don't have to feel that post-meal slump anymore. Because generally that slump comes from your glucose having spiked and now dropping. Because after every spike, there's a drop. And this drop can make you feel really, really, really tired. So if you feel those symptoms of the post-meal crash, the best thing to do is to start with your breakfast. So have a savory breakfast. Then the second thing I would recommend is at lunchtime, make sure that you start your meals with a specific type of ingredient that is going to help balance your glucose levels. And before I tell you what that is, I want to tell you about this amazing research study, Jay. So researchers looked at a meal and they found that if participants ate the elements of that meal in a specific order, they could reduce the glucose spike of the meal by up to 75%.
Huge. That's huge.
Without changing how much they're eating, without changing what they're eating overall, just by changing the order. And when I was in school, I remember biology teachers telling us, oh, when you eat, it all becomes a big soup in your stomach. And so I thought, how is this possible? How can the order in which you eat the elements of a meal have an impact? So the research is fantastic. It turns out that when you start your meals with vegetables, the fiber in the veggies, when you eat it first, has time to coat your upper intestine and create a sort of protective mesh, okay, like a shield on the walls of your intestine. And that shield then slows down how quickly the rest of the meal is going to access your bloodstream, how quickly the molecules from the rest of the meal are going to make their way into your bloodstream. And so veggies first is this very important hack. Now, the scientists...
I used to always eat my veggies last.
Really? Because you hated them?
Yeah, because you eat all the carbs first and all the rest of it. You're like, oh, yeah.
And actually, so when you go to restaurants, they often give you bread at the beginning of the meal.
Yeah.
And actually, it's pretty smart. So I think there's a whole conspiracy here. Because if you give people some bread at the beginning of your meal, so you're super hungry, you eat the bread. Bread is starch, it turns to glucose. So very quickly you experience this glucose spike. And about 90 minutes later, you're crashing. And that's when the waiter comes over and is like, hi, anybody would like some dessert? And at that point, you're feeling this intense craving for sugar because of that glucose drop. So you're going to order dessert.
Wow. That makes sense to me. I love bread at the start and dessert at the end. Yeah.
But the best thing to do actually is to delay that bread and first have your veggies and then have your main dish and have the bread, during the main dish or after the main dish. And that way you can still enjoy the bread, but the glucose molecules are going to be protected by that fiber mesh and not going to create that big of a spike. So you won't feel those cravings 90 minutes later. You won't feel the energy crash. So that's another super important hack. And if you do nothing else, just at your next meal, eat what you would normally eat. Just add a plate of vegetables to the beginning of your meal. And it can be 3 baby carrots. It can be some beautiful roasted cauliflower with tahini or whatever. It can be some salad. It can be any sort of veggies you have in your fridge, and tomatoes count as well. And you'll see how different you feel after the meal. No crash, no cravings. And you're also helping your body become healthier from within. And interestingly, Jay, this hack actually has a lot of parallels in cultural habits. So, I'm French, and in France, we have this tradition of crudité at the beginning of a meal, which is raw veggies. In Italy, they have antipasti, which is generally vegetables at the beginning of the meal. In the Middle East, you usually start your meals with herbs eaten by the bunch. So none of the stuff I'm talking about is that revolutionary. It's kind of common sense, but we've lost touch with these traditions, and now we understand the science behind them, so I want us to bring them back.
Yeah, that's spectacular. There was a study you were about to quote, and then I cut you off.
Tell me.
With I don't know, you were about to say, and the study says, and then I said, I used to eat my vegetables last. I don't know what that was.
I think I was just talking about the food order. Okay, so 75%. And so ideally, from a scientific standpoint, you would always start your meals with the veggies, then the proteins and the fats, and then the carbs last, the starches and sugars last. Now, that's a scientific theory. And if you want to decompose your meal and do that specific order, you can. But I think from this science, we can just extract the most important piece of information, which is veggies first, and the carbs towards the end of the meal to reduce the spike.
I think that's so practical.
Yeah.
I think all of us can at least do that
Yes.
with whatever's on our plates. And if we can just make that shift today, we're going to start to see the benefit, and that will hopefully push us in that direction.
Exactly. And then naturally you crave less sugar and you feel better. And it's these small tweaks, and you don't have to cut out foods. We're not talking about restricting how much you're eating. I'm actually telling you to add food to your meal, and that is going to improve your health. So veggies first. That's another very key hack that I recommend people try out.